PhD student. There we go. We're recording now. Welcome to Civics for all ages. But I'm also a full-time PhD student at New York University in international education. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to and moderate this roundtable discussion titled Civics for All Ages, Civic Learning and Civic Engagement as a Lifelong Journey. And to be joined by this impressive, diverse panel of experts from students to seasoned professionals who all care so much about civic education across Maryland. And so we're going to begin. Before our discussion, we're going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Leah Atnett, who is the Maryland History Day Outreach and Professional Development Coordinator at Maryland Humanities in Baltimore City. Leah.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Hello, everyone. I'm Leah Atnett. I am the Outreach and Professional Development Coordinator at Maryland Humanities, but I'm here today representing Maryland History Day, which is our state affiliate of National History Day. It's a long-term history project that asks students to research a topic of their choice, explain its significance in history, and present their work as either an exhibit, a website, a documentary, a performance, or a paper. And the project culminates in contests at the school, district, state, and national levels. So what makes History Day a civic experience for students? First of all, it gives students the opportunity to investigate their own interests and values by giving them the choice of what to study. Their participation in democracy later on will be predicated on them taking a stance on those interests and values. This project gives them the chance to explore what those are. Beyond this, History Day gives students the tools that they need to participate in civic life after they're done the project. So they learn to do research, state and support a position, collect evidence, tie historical events to what's happening in the world today. They learn to evaluate perspective and sources, which helps them understand the creator's position or bias. So today, all those skills are for History Day, but tomorrow, it might be for a policy or a practice that they disagree with, and these skills will allow them to take action. It's also important to note that we engage other community members in History Day as well, adults at many stages of their careers and lives as judges at our contest. And this gives students the experience of sharing and defending their work, and gives community members the opportunity to support students' growth and guide part of their learning through the feedback that they give. The judges will evaluate students based on the strength of their argument and evidence, which requires them to put their own interests and preference to the side. So it really is an experience of lifelong learning for both the students and for the community members as well.
Thank you so much, Leah. We're now going to move on to Robin Anzulis, who is an alumna of the Maryland Legion Auxiliary's Girls State and Oratorical Programs, and also serves as a data analyst at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory. Robin.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, so as Anthony said, when I was in high school, I was a part of the American Legion Auxiliary Maryland Girls State's 2017 class of citizens. And I also competed in the American Legion's National High School Oratorical Contest. And the American Legion and American Legion Auxiliary are veterans organizations. They're organizations that exist to support veterans and also exist to help the next generation get involved in civics and just to promote the things that our veterans have fought for. The thing that I love about this program is these programs is that they are opportunities for teenagers to learn about, debate, and get involved and work together on different civic engagement. So the oratorical contest, students memorize, research, write, and memorize speeches on the U.S. Constitution and deliver them without notes, microphone, or podium. So it's an extremely difficult competition, but it forces them to really learn what's in their nation's founding document. And American Legion Auxiliary Maryland Girls State Program is a week-long civic education program for young women where they form a mock state government. And in that program, it's exciting to watch the girls form close bonds with each other, debate legislation and policy, and they just always come up with the best solutions to all sorts of different issues that are going on in our state. And so it's always really encouraging to come back and volunteer with them. So yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Robin. Excellent. And we'll next move on to William Onofre, who is the student governor of the Maryland Student Legislature, and in a few short weeks will be graduating from Mount St. Mary's University in Frederick County.
Thank you so much. And I am so excited to be here. It's so great to be here. As Anthony mentioned, I am the governor of the Maryland Student Legislature. I was elected last year. And pretty much the Maryland Student Legislature is a nonprofit organization that allows students to write legislation and debate their legislation. And students from different Maryland institutions all across the state get to participate and have their voices be heard. In this organization, they get to know more about parliamentary procedure, how legislation is passed, and they get to also network and connect with other state officials as well. And not only does this organization help students learn how their government works, but it also gives them a chance to advocate for issues that they care about the most. As governor, I am responsible for organizing the legislative activities in the Maryland Student Legislature. And in 2 weeks, we're actually going to go to the State House, and where students are going to debate their legislation there. And if their legislation is passed in the Maryland Student Legislature, I have the honor and privilege of signing those pieces of legislation. Once those pieces of legislation are signed, they get to go on the desks of real senators, state senators, and state delegates. And students' voices would be heard because the Maryland politicians are looking at their ideas and could consider them. There have been some pieces of legislation in this organization that state senators and state delegates have actually considered. And so it's such an honor and a privilege to organize events and make sure that students know about parliamentary procedure, make sure they know about bill writing to help find their voice in Maryland politics. So that is what I do.
How great is that? Perhaps a future senator or governor here with us. And speaking of which, maybe another future president. We're going to move over to Christopher, who's joined by his teacher, Felicity Ross. Christopher is a student at the Francis Scott Key Elementary Middle School in Baltimore City.
Hey there, I'm Felicity Ross. This is my student, Christopher. He's going to tell you a little bit about a project we worked on together. I'm going to let him go ahead and talk.
My name is Christopher, and I am a first grader at Francis Scott Key Elementary Middle School in Baltimore City. I worked with 4 other first graders and our teacher, Miss Rush. We made a grant to help grandpas and grandmas. We decided to give large print books to senior citizens because we know our grandmas and grandpas like to read, but also many of them need glasses. So we might give magnifying glasses and large print word search books to senior citizens. We interviewed our grandpas, grandparents, and parents to get book suggestions. We got $345 grant money, and we'll donate the books to our retirement center.
So along with Christopher, I worked with a couple different groups of students, and they all received Kid Kindness grants, which I encourage everyone to check out who works with children. Kid Kindness, or Kindness Grows Here Foundation, provides Kid Kindness grants. Each fall is the period when you can apply for them, and they solicit kindness, basically projects of kindness from students who are ages 5 through 18. Their grants are kind of small grants. And so, as Christopher said, his group of 4 other students worked together to really think about who they wanted to help, how they wanted to help them. And they decided that they wanted to help senior citizens, and by providing some books to a retirement home. And they also plan to work with a local bookstore. And so we've been talking about that as well.
Can everyone join me in a round of applause for Christopher and his colleagues at Francis Scott Key? Amazing job, amazing work. All right, thank you so much, Felicity and Christopher. And we'll move on, last but not least, to introduce Deborah Wood. And Deborah is the Museum Learning Manager at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, also in Baltimore City.
Thanks, Anthony. I don't know how to follow up on Christopher and Miss Ross's fabulous work, but I'm excited to share a little bit about mine. The Maryland Center for History and Culture is a museum and library focused on our local history and culture. We're located next door, basically, to the Maryland Humanities, and we work closely on supporting students' History Day projects. As the museum learning manager, I manage our K through 12 and our higher education on-site programs, and I have the privilege of training and managing our docents and our interns. So through all of this, I get to engage visitors from preschool to lifelong senior learners in stories about Maryland's history, culture, and civic life. I particularly want to take a moment to highlight some of our current, fairly new semi-permanent exhibit that we have up on the history of civil rights activism in Maryland. Through this exhibition and through our programming around it, we hope to inspire all of our visitors, regardless of their age, to consider their own potential for activism, given historical and recent precedent. We used to be the Maryland Historical Society, but just a couple of years ago, we renamed ourselves as the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And that centerpiece is at the core of who we want to be going forward. We want to be an inviting and inclusive space where all members of our community can gather, can learn about our shared history, about our cultural communities today, and to be inspired by them, as well as to share their own histories, cultures, and ideas. We want, in our education programs in particular, we're looking to develop students and adults' visual thinking skills, primary source reading, and to generally support all learners in justifying their perspectives with evidence. I'm really excited to hear from all of our panelists and our session members here today, and as we all engage in this project of civics learning for all ages.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I'm going to stop sharing screen. And if you want to turn your camera, now is a great time, because I want us all to give all of our speakers a round of applause for their incredible and inspiring work. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to jump right into it. The plan for this roundtable is to have a short discussion session with the panelists and move into time for Q&A with all participants who are here with us today. And so as you listen and you hear what our panelists have to say, I invite you to add questions or comments in the chat, because you will have about 10 minutes after the discussion for a live Q&A here, kind of a conversation. So the focus of this roundtable is civics for all ages, and the role that all Marylanders can and should play in the civic life of their communities, regardless of their age or background. And in many ways, this topic encourages us to consider how what we learn in a classroom, through a conversation, or through some other forum leads us to develop understandings and skills that affect our lifelong civic behaviors and actions. I believe someone in this room, I think Julie, you once had an analogy that we need to stop thinking of civics as eating our broccoli. Some people like broccoli, maybe, so maybe that's not a good analogy, but make it something that people enjoy doing, that people feel a responsibility to be civically engaged with their communities in one way or another. Not just as students, not just in a classroom or in a debate, a mock debate, but in the real lived experiences they have as community members in Maryland. And so with that in mind, and to start out our conversation, I would like to ask each of our panelists to provide a specific example about how their civic education, whether that was in the classroom or outside of a classroom, has informed or influenced their real life participation in their community. And so I'm going to call on someone to start us off. And I think I'll go back to Leah for the first.
Sure, yeah. So for me, I think the thing that has most shaped my civic experience has been, and this might be a little more general because I can't just come up with one specific example, but putting myself in situations where I'm able to learn from people with different backgrounds from me. So for example, in grad school, one of my friends was from Japan and her family was from Nagasaki, and she had family members who were affected by the bombing. So through her, I was able to get involved in anti-nuclear protests and gatherings that were happening in Boston where we were living. My partner's from Turkey and grew up with varying degrees of financial insecurity and political consciousness. So through that connection, I was able to join gatherings of people from Turkey and the Middle East, and I learned about the experience of Kurdish people in Turkey who are discriminated against and sometimes targeted by the government. I learned about the persecution of journalists and other people who speak out against the government. We have friends who were fired from their jobs for signing petitions. I've worked with people with dementia. I've worked with people with other disabilities. I've volunteered at a local hospital. I've worked with Indigenous Alaskan communities. So I've just had all these experiences that have allowed me to meet different people and hear different ideas. And all of these have helped shape my worldview and my belief that everyone's voices are important and everyone's stories need to be told. And sometimes we need to get outside of our bubble in order to learn from others. So in my work with History Day, I'm a strong believer that this is a way to elevate all students' voices. I've been an advocate for English learners doing History Day. I know that a lot of teachers are nervous about the struggles that their students will have in this project. If they are English learners, or if they learn differently or have disabilities, if they are reading below grade level, but even if they don't achieve mastery of all those skills that I talked about earlier, they're still learning. They will still have valuable exposure to those skills, and they'll have this experience of exploring their interests and values and expressing themselves. And so coming back to this idea of getting outside your bubble, for teachers, you might think about who can I bring into the classroom, or what sources can I present that allow students to empathize with an experience that they're not familiar with. So it's really all about empathy.
Thank you, Leah. That's very interesting. And I'd invite, if other speakers want to build out on some of those ideas, some of those that Leah mentioned, or your own. And I see Ms. Ross has her hand raised.
So I just want to say I love National History Day. I was a judge this year at our school one, and some of the most interesting projects honestly were from our ELL students, because there's so much open choice in the History Day projects that they chose projects that resonated with them. So that was really fun to see. So I just wanted to say, I'm a math teacher. I don't want to do a History Day project, but I love to see what everyone else does. So that's great. I also would say that for me, I was in Teach for America in 1994. And that, I think, for me, was where I got a lot of my civics from. So I'm sure I did before then, but it opened doors to experiences that I had not ever had growing up in a small town in Michigan, and then being placed in urban Baltimore. And also basically just from that experience, my 2-year commitment in the Corps has informed pretty much all that I've done from then on, which has been a variety of things.
Thanks, Ms. Ross. And you bring up a good point, that civics education doesn't just happen in social studies classrooms, that this is something that applies in whether you're a mathematics teacher, or I see Eliza Carney and Carrie Shapley are in the room, whether you teach music and the arts and song and dance, that civics education can be woven through all of the curricular offerings at a school. William, you have your hand up. We'll move to you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to highlight the importance of empathy, as Leah mentioned. Empathy is extremely important, I believe, in civics engagement. I had the opportunity to intern for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, and I was able to talk on the phone and was able to meet with claimants in person, victims who fell to crime, and to listen to their stories and to understand the trauma that they have gone through was a really important aspect and a really important feature of the job. And having that sense of empathy and understanding, that not everybody is going to live in a safe neighborhood. Not everyone is going to have the right amount of money to afford education or to maybe afford food on their table. And so I think that understanding where people come from, their struggles, their challenges is extremely important. And that's why we must stay involved in civic engagement, because we can be that change to those people that desperately need help. So I just wanted to add on to that point. And I guess that's also one thing that I've definitely learned from my civic education.
William, just building on that, not everyone has the privilege of their civic engagement being located in the classroom, that sometimes people need to, starting at a young age, need to take action into their own hands because there's no other choice. And so it's something learned, yes, of course, in the classroom, but through experience that we don't always have a choice to be in that position. So thank you. Deborah and Robin, I'll invite either of you to jump in at this point.
Yeah, so one program that I can speak to obviously is the American Legion Auxiliary Maryland Girls State program. And I would say that that's fueled my civic participation in two key ways. Number one, the Girls State program breaks it down into city, county, and state level government, which is really important because a lot of times the stuff that makes the headlines is what happens on the national level, when really a lot of what influences our day-to-day life is what's happening at the city or state level. And so from that program, I learned actually what's involved in city and county and state government. I didn't even know that, I came from Carroll County, and so we had a county commissioner system. I didn't even know that other counties just have a county executive and the structure looks different. And so the other way that impacted me was that going to Girls State occurred at a really critical time in my life because I was 17 and a year later, I had the right to vote. And so having that background and now knowing the importance of local politics, it encouraged me to make sure I did my research on candidates before voting and to vote in every election, and also to get involved in voting when I went to college. So I volunteered with an organization that registers students to vote, and continued to be engaged in a number of organizations where we debated policy and discussed different issues, both at the local and national level when I went to college. So yeah, that's how it's informed my civic participation.
And I'm happy to jump in with some experiences in my own life as well. I think I had a fabulous civics education in the classroom. I did K through 12 in Wisconsin and learned about all of these levels of government and the importance of voting and jury trials. And then had the chance to leave Wisconsin and experience new places in college through study abroad, through teaching EFL in South Korea, and then moving to California for graduate school and encountering whole new segments of people that I hadn't encountered in the middle of the country. And one of the most profound parts of my out of the classroom civics education, I think, happened when I was in grad school, as I got involved in lobbying for sexual harassment protections around the workplace and around the education spaces. And one of those features that's always going to stand out in my mind is taking a bus to Sacramento with fellow graduate students and undergraduate students who are passionate about this and lobbying our state senators and representatives to take action, to weigh in on bills and other, and also the University of California student agreements. And it was just that moment of taking empathy and combining it with action, and it helped me, I think, move my civics understanding from something that I knew about to something that I knew I could put into action, something that I could embody and put myself into advocacy positions for myself and for others. And that was just a really profound movement. It's really shaped how I understand myself as a civic actor and how I try to interact with young people and encourage them as also as our whole new generation of civic actors and shapers of our new community.
Thanks, Deborah. It sounds like that isn't something that you haven't left that part of your experience in the past, that it's something that is carrying with you beyond grad school and into your career and life. Just a reminder that if you have questions for our panelists, to please put them in the chat or to be writing them down, and in just a few minutes we'll get to questions. But I have a question for Christopher. Christopher, can you tell us when you were working with Miss Ross and your friends to create this opportunity for grandmas and grandpas, what did it feel like to work with your friends to create this really good project? What did that feel like for you?
It felt good to help other people in need.
And is this something that you would like to do in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that all of your friends at Francis Scott Key, that all of your friends would like to do these types of things, to create these kinds of projects?
Yes, I think they would. Talk really loud. Yes, I think they would.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Ms. Ross, can you tell us a little bit about how, we just have a few minutes left, but for students like Christopher in first grade, they have their entire lives ahead of them, right? So the habits that they're developing now and the knowledge they're developing now, it's really important. So how do you create projects like this and listen to ideas and work with students? What's a model? What do you wish other teachers knew about first graders and how to get them engaged in these types of opportunities?
So I think, first of all, just even understanding that first graders can, with help, write a grant, and that there are opportunities available to them. And really the model we used, it was like a white piece of paper, on the back wall. And we just said who, what, where, when, why. So there were a lot of ideas. They talked about anti-bullying campaigns. When the grandmas and grandpas thing first came up, one of the students, not Christopher, but someone said, let's make old people glasses. And I had to ask them, do you know how to do that? And they're like, not yet. So we, sometimes the ideas were so big and we had to kind of understand, well, let's keep it simple. But I think, so I'm a teacher of gifted students, and that's who I work with at my school. And one of the things that I really care about is the social emotional well-being of all of my students, not just my gifted students. And I believe that this kind of a project is so empowering to students of all ages and adults who can say like, oh, I see a problem. I want to do something about it. I'm going to figure out how to do that. And I also think grant writing is a skill that I know a lot of my friends don't have. And now Christopher has had an intro to grant writing. And again, I said I was working with some other kids. I have some middle schoolers who've pulled off some grants. And it's really empowering. One of the grants projects for a different grant was to help fund our literary magazine. So not only are they working on the literary magazine, but they're like, but we want to distribute it more widely. So I think it's just very empowering. And I think it's huge.
That's excellent. And Christopher, if you need a job in grant writing, you just let me know because we need someone. All right. But I hope we didn't have a lot of time to hear the rich stories that I'm sure that we could get into if we had hours and hours with our panelists. But the evolution from first grade, kindergarten, pre-K, when support is given to young people, when that support continues and cascades the whole way through college and university, and then whatever comes next, the types of skills and the types of change that can be catalyzed is just unthinkable and unstoppable. So thank you to all of our panelists for sharing a bit about your experiences. And I'd like to open it up at this point. We have about 10 minutes for some Q&A with the audience. And so if any brave soul would like to raise your hand, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, or you can also, if you don't know how to do that, you can simply unmute yourself as well. Eliza Carney has a question.
Hi, thank you, Anthony, and thank you for this panel. I think there is a kind of acknowledged dearth of resources, frankly, available for civic learning and service learning for very young students. And as someone who works with the elementary school population, I'm kind of interested in other people's experiences and observations about this. And also if there's certain places that you think are particularly good for finding that type of resource.
So I'm seeing thinking going on. Leah and Deborah both seem like they're really thinking hard about this one.
Well, I can say, I don't have a great answer, and you are correct that there is a dearth of resources. When it comes to History Day, we are trying to grade down our materials for 4th and 5th graders, and that's, again, not our youngest students, but we do see the potential for students to get started on learning some of these really valuable skills even earlier. Because really, the skills of, finding evidence to support a claim, students can be starting on things like that in kindergarten. They'll just start on it at a very small scale. And they'll build on that throughout their whole academic careers as their claims will get more and more complex, and they'll be able to do more and more sophisticated research to find those sources. But when they're starting out, teachers can help scaffold that. We can give them the sources, we can give them the claim and show them how those things fit together. So we are trying, and we've been piloting it in a few different counties with a few different schools for 4th and 5th graders, and we're hoping to see more interest in teachers using this project in order to give students a head start on some of those skills.
I'm going to put in the chat the Kindness Grows Here website, and full disclosure, I am on their board now, but I wasn't until I had students submit so many projects and they're like, hey, we think you like us. So I thought it was great before I was on the board, but I do resources there. And in addition to the grants, they have various events throughout the state, and they're trying to expand as well. And the other thing that comes to mind is mentorship. And it's not so much with young kids. So I feel like an extension of that is kind of bringing in speakers, bringing in others to share what they're doing.
Yeah, thank you. With our program, that's a very core and quite successful element, but I love hearing about that new group. Thank you.
So if others have questions, please raise your hand. I'm going to ask William to give a 30-second response to a question I have, moving to a different age group. There's some that say that there's a crisis in terms of civic engagement among Generation Z and younger folks in terms of recruiting them for national service programs to just community engagement in general. What would your response be to that age group and what's going on right now with their civic engagement, William?
Well, if it comes to in terms of being heard, I would say never give up. Your voice is just as important. And it's if you really want to advocate for change, it comes with persistency. And if you want to, let people acknowledge that there is a problem to other people that perhaps other people may have not known about, it is our job, I believe, to inform the public and to just never give up. And persistency is something that that my father and I would say my mother taught me as well, is to always keep trying, and always make sure that your voice is heard, because your voice is just as important.
Thanks for that, William. Other questions from the audience or our speakers?
If there are no other questions, I can follow up a little bit on what William was talking about. I just graduated from college a year ago, and yeah, I can definitely relate to this idea of, that there's a little bit, sometimes can be a little bit of apathy, or even people kind of giving up on making a change just because they're not seeing things happening. But one thing that always encourages me is whenever I do get to spend time with young people who are engaged in policy and politics, they always have the best ideas. The young ladies I work with at Girls State, they always come up with the most creative ideas for different problems. The people that I judged at the oratorical contest this year, they always are just so creative about how they think about the way that the Constitution motivates our civic engagement. And then in college, seeing other college students participating in various ways on political campaigns and community organizations, tutoring students in the community. I went to school in an area where a lot of the student population is underserved. And so just being a part of that and getting to see some of my classmates be a part of that gave me a lot of hope for the future. And so yeah, like William said, I think there's a lot to be excited about, and a lot to be hopeful for.
On that wonderful note, Robin, I want to make sure we have enough time for our group discussions, and so thank you all for these wonderful responses. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into breakout room discussions. You've already been assigned. Before we begin, I encourage you to, and I can share it in a moment here. As we go into breakout room discussions, I encourage you to read this slide of conversation norms. This is a civically minded summit, and so we ask you to be civil and to please speak from your own experiences, to be respectful. All ideas are welcome. Keep an open mind, seek to understand, and be aware of how much space you take up. And remember to center and celebrate youth voices like those of Christopher. And so what we're going to do is Julie is going to place a link in the chat because we're going to be taking notes during these discussions. And there is already a designated note taker and a facilitator for the small group discussions. And we also have a set of questions which are in the notes in that document. And also, I'm putting them in the chat so that you can have them as well. There are 5 questions. We probably won't get to all of them in the 20 minutes we have in the breakout room, but we'll try. And if you have other questions, let it be a guided conversation. And if you encounter any technical difficulties, just please simply send us a note in the chat. And I think that we'll come back here at about 5:05. So with that, I'll let our tech folks take over and give us instructions for the breakout rooms.
Hi there, Ebony. I'm going to assign you to a breakout room. Hey there, Ebony, do you want to go back to the same room? Ebony, did you want to go to a breakout room? So there's about 10 minutes left. If you'd like to go back to a breakout room, let me know. Hey, everybody.
All right, welcome back. Gonna wait just a minute as others trickle in. All right, welcome back, everyone. I see the avalanche of people coming back from the breakout rooms, and I hope that your discussions were just as interesting and engaging as the one that I was in. I think if we had maybe 3 more minutes, we could have answered some of those problems in question 3. But before we wrap up, we just have a few minutes. I'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to share seriously 1 minute or less of closing thoughts on today's discussion. And we're going to start with Robin.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation in our breakout rooms. We talked about just a lot of things. We talked about everything from I especially appreciated kind of the closing thoughts about how we can get communities that would normally be the ones that we think of as needing service, getting them involved in service as well. And, having sort of empowering people to affect change where they're at. Just the focus on, thinking locally.
Thank you, Robin. Let's go to Miss Ross and Christopher.
All I have to say is just thank you for having me.
We enjoyed our breakout as well. And thank you for having us. And thank you for highlighting such a young student. I think it is surprising when I talk about the project, and I love all the support. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. William.
Yes, first, thank you guys so much for having me. I really liked all the things that everyone said in my breakout room, from exchanging ideas with others, from building community, making sure that people are getting involved, and making sure that our kids are getting involved because they are our next generation. And just hearing all these great ideas really does enlighten me. And so I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone who participated, and I really enjoyed being here. Thank you so much.
Deborah.
I am really excited around our conversations of empathy and how we can work together and use our focus on others, our care for others to motivate our civic participation. And I'm really excited to see how our community continues to evolve. Thank you for having me and the Maryland Center for History and Culture here with you today.
Thanks, Deborah. And Leah.
Right. Well, in my group, there was a lot from our conversation that resonated with people, from the need for empathy to how to break through or get around the barriers for access that exist because of race or citizenship or any other reason. One thing that I really liked from our conversation, Rusty Vague said it actually, the importance of explaining the context and explaining to students, why are we doing this? What does this mean for the future? Why is this so important to learn what civics is, why we are doing civic action, why are we learning those things? But yeah, it was a great conversation, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to everyone.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you to Julie and to our tech support for this roundtable discussion. Remember, civics is for all ages, and spread the news and keep the conversations going. So thank you all. One last round of applause for our speakers. All right, and as you see in the chat, you can go back to the main Zoom room for the Youth Service and Civics Slam. Take care. Julie, we're all done here.
Yes, I think we are all good. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. See you later.
For everyone still in the chat, in about 2 minutes, I'm going to kick you back to the waiting room. If you do not click the umd.zoom.us link that Julie Miller just dropped in the chat, that will take you back to the main event where you should be right now. So once again, the link in the chat posted by Julie Miller at 5:10 p.m. will take you to where you are supposed to be. This room is about to be empty. Just letting you know. Deanna and Roy, just letting you know, final warning. Click the Zoom link down in the chat to take you to the room where the engagement is ongoing. This is a smaller room, not the main event for right now. Thank you, Roy. Perfect. All right.